start recording. A few things. I know some folks are pretty familiar with Teams, so this might be redundant information, but just in case, if you're not familiar with it, number one, find that mute button. It's you'll see this little bar at the bottom of your screen, on Microsoft Teams, and this little microphone button is your mute and unmute button. So just that's your quick, easy access to that. The other thing I wanted to highlight is don't feel like you have to use it, but there is a feature called raise your hands, and that's just a more if let's say people are having a discussion and you have something valuable to put in, but you don't want to stop what the conversation that's going on. Feel free to use the raise your hands function. That way we can, on our end, we can just see the list of names in order of when their hands were raised and kind of better manage it. So up to you. Feel free to just chime in, but if you want to not so like you don't want to interrupt the conversation, feel free to use the raise your hands function. Okay, great. So I like to always start before we ever talk about anything is talk about the purpose of this project. Chris Harris, I think I'm gonna take a stab at it with I always try to summarize it in one sentence, and if I missed anything, feel free to fill in the gaps. But what we're trying to do here with ODOT TSM is really develop a plan that looks out 5 to 10 years and really figure out where we want to go so that we can identify all the necessary skills, all the necessary equipment, and all the systems and partnerships needed to basically go where we want to go in terms of data collection and reporting, and there's also a desire within the program to establish interoperability between different groups in ODOT. Right now, there are some kinds of data that is kind of siloed in different groups. So I think this is just an opportunity for us to see what's out there in ODOT, what kinds of data is being collected, and how can we just better talk to each other, and better share in one common platform if it makes sense. Chris, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that wrapped it up perfectly. Thank you.
I'll be honest, I stole some of the words you said during our last check-in, so I kind of recrafted using your language.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so this is our agenda. Today it's very much focused on this. By the way, if you're not able to be in front of a computer and not able to see the screen, don't feel left out. The agenda is really all you really need. This slide deck ahead of you is just gonna be just a list of questions and just a visual aid for us. So don't feel like you need to be in front of a monitor in order for you to be able to contribute to this. Very much we want to listen, and we're just gonna be taking notes based on the discussion. So really this for this group, what we want to talk about is what are the data needs from from your based on your roles, so whether it's requests you're getting or just from studies that you're conducting, what kind of data do you need to collect, and then the other bit of it is we want to talk about the current ODOT TSM program and where they want to go in the future, what's some room for improvement there, and then there's a little item that's purposefully called group activity. I put it kind of vague because I was kind of skeptical we would have enough time, but I think there was a few important points that I want to touch on. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the group activity. I'm going to mostly give an overview of a framework, and if we have time, we can brainstorm some ideas there. At the minimum, I'm just going to give you an overview, and then we'll talk about next steps. Where do we go from here? All right, so let's jump straight to it. Data needs, we got a couple of questions that we raised up to the group, this is three starter questions here. What kinds of report and data collection is required or mandated for ODOT TSM? I was wondering maybe a good way to go around this is, could we start, maybe Chris Harris, you can kick us off as agency project manager. If you can give your perspective on some of these questions that we've raised, and then I'll go around the room, maybe starting with those who raise hands, and then I'll just go in alphabetical order after that. Chris Harris, do you want to start?
Sure. And I'll kind of hit the high level. I think Don and the team will be able to put some more details to it. But from our group, really, we have some federally mandated reporting for the HPMS submittal. So we need traffic volumes, classification data, K&D factors, some peak vehicle data that all gets wrapped up into our HPMS submittal every year. That's really the big one. And then we have our customers, so folks like designers and safety folks that all ask for information. Our planners, economists, all types of things there where they use information. And then we have folks from local agencies, from consulting firms, even citizens. I think one of the first requests that I had that Don sent my way was a guy who lived near the interstate and wanted to know how many trucks were passing, at one time period versus another time period. So, and then of course, with legislative sessions coming up, our data is tied closely with economics and environmental type things. It's really a really broad cross section of things. It's okay. I'll kick it over to Don Crownover. He is the guru when it comes to traffic data and has really our best historical perspective on things. And let you kind of add a little more detail to those items if you don't mind, Don.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just, sorry, Don. Can I interrupt you for 1 second? So I just realized, how rude of me. I forgot to go through introductions. So I'll just introduce myself. My name's Yeeman. I work with Kittleson. I'm the consultant project manager, and I'm working with the ODOT TSM group to develop this plan. Chris Harris, do you want to give a quick introduction? And what we'll do is, as I call out people, can you tell your name, organization, and role, and then we can answer the questions.
Sure. So I'm Chris Harris. I'm the program operations lead in the TSM unit. I'm over here on we'll see how long it ends up being, maybe about a 1.5 year rotation. And I'm the agency project manager for the project.
Great. Go ahead, Don.
Okay, I'm Don Crownover with ODOT. I'm hearing feedback. Is everybody else hearing that from me too?
Yeah. Let's see where I'm getting that feedback. Let's see.
You might need to mute your speakers on your. You're dialed in, Don?
Yes.
You might need to mute your speakers on your computer.
Oh boy. Okay, how about now? No.
Still
Don,
showing
you should
up.
be able to just click on your speaker icon. That'll turn off your speaker and headset.
That's good. Maybe that will be something I'll add into the housekeeping thing as well. If you're calling it on 2 devices, mute your PC. Like, you're not the first and you're not the last.
I did the same
How about
thing.
now?
Still echoing.
Well, the message is so important. We need to hear it twice.
Well, maybe if I
Oh, it sounds
That sounds better.
good now.
turn off the phone.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
No,
good
you got
then?
it, Don.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. I just muted on the computer too. So, Don Crownover, I'm the state traffic count engineer. I normally do day-to-day operations too, but right now I'm mostly on the project to shift from our old database program TCM to our new MS2 database.
Great. So Don, do you want to take a stab at some of the questions that that I have on the screen right here? I received some of the input you provided for the first question about the types of data that you're requested, but do you mind summarizing it for the group if you don't mind?
Sure. We have, as far as required mandated, especially that word mandate, we have stuff from the congressional level and the legislative level that requires us to do our work and put the data out. With Congress, it's mostly the HPMS submittal, which we provide volumes as well as detail on classifications, K factors, D factors, etc., on both state and non-state roads. And legislatively, we have it written into several bills and ORSs that we are the source for data related to, for instance, access management and whether the foresters can clear cut above a road or not. So it's important that we provide that data each year so that those particular requests can be made or can be fulfilled. But of course, that's far less than what we do as a whole, because there are a lot of things that ODOT needs internally to do their pavement work, bridge work, planning, even up to our economists using the roll-ups of data that are found in VMTs. Outside the agency, we have other jurisdictions that need the data that we put out there, reporters, gas companies, billboard companies, and as Chris mentioned, citizens just have a curiosity about their particular situation. We get stuff from people who are trying to make a political stab at something, and so we usually try to make sure that the government agency involved at that also knows that that's going on at the side.
And Don,
we have a wide variety.
Great. Sorry, there was a little lag on my end. I didn't mean to interrupt. So my question is, you mentioned a couple of different customers who are asking for data. Is most of the data more of the HPMS focused data set? So is it? Are you talking about mostly traffic counts? What kind of data do you provide other than traffic counts? It sounds like you do some VMT, right? You do some calculations of VMT. Is there anything else that's non-volume based that you're providing or collecting?
No, it's mostly the traffic stats, the AADT, percent trucks, Ks and D factors. Some customers want detailed data by time. They want to see the whole profile of the volume during the day, or specifically peak hour type data. We also do turning movement counts all around the state, and those get used on projects and modeling. So it's really the pretty basic traffic data. Our group is kind of on the fringes for things like the RIDIS or HERE data, where it's a third party having probe data and that kind of thing. That's not the data that we hand out. Other groups deal with that, but we at least try to keep up on what is going on with that, so that we can refer the people that are really looking for that kind of thing to the groups that know about it.
Perfect. Thanks, Don.
You bet.
I'm gonna control this a little bit. Chris Wright, do you want to go next? And then Paul, you can, I'd like you to chime in after Chris, right, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Heman. First off, just wanted to say how excited I am of this effort to have the Kittleson team join ODOT and launch this project. This is something I've been interested in, worked with Don on it for the last, the concept about the last year or so, and was able to bring on Chris to help fill this role and give us a little bit of bench strength while Don leads us into the MS2 implementation. As far as the data needs, Don really touched on everything. I think the only other thing I would add is we're definitely in this spot where we're trying to balance the traditional needs of a, DOT being the primary data generator, and there's a lot of interest and honestly a bit of pressure both externally through providers and through some of our local partners, primarily NPOs, really around data aggregation and having some clarity around, traffic counts, what we consider kind of the ODOT gold standard, which are our short-term and continuous counts through the program versus some of the third-party data providers like Streetlight, here, INRIX. So I know we'll touch on that a little later, but that is kind of a continued conversation that I have with folks like Galen McGill and Brian Dunn and T-Pow. But overall, I think Don really touched on, we're still, our bread and butter is kind of our continuous count program, short-term count. We do interact with our motor carrier and way in motion program to get some data out from that program and use it in a different way than kind of their enforcement focus. But still haven't made a ton of progress on sharing data between ITS and signals, and so that's something we'll want to dig into as this plan goes on. But I think that's about it. But again, I appreciate everyone's time and looking forward to this workshop and the others that we have planned over the next couple weeks.
Great, thanks, Chris. Paul, you want to go next?
Sure. My name's Paul. I'm with the TSM unit. My background is primarily was a field technician. I was an end user of the data collection equipment, cameras, road tubes, radars. So that's where my experience comes from. And recently stepped into a role of a field coordinator for the field technicians, basically 3 months ago. So my focus and primary role now is to support the field technicians, keeping the equipment running and acquiring new equipment. That's about it.
Great, thanks, Paul. And I know we've got a lot of other folks on the call as well, and I really want to hear from all of you because the first 4 folks I've talked to them before, but everyone else, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to list out the names in alphabetical order as it comes up on Teams, and if I missed anyone after that, I'd like you to introduce yourself as well. But Ali, do you want to give a quick introduction, name, organization, role, and just share an overview of what you do and what are some data needs from your perspective? And then after Ali, Craig, if you can go next, that would be awesome. Ali?
I'm Ali Jahanejad, Traffic Monitoring Coordinator. I help Chris and Don in generating reports, coordinating with other people, with some other units. And as far as data requests, I think Chris and Don, they mentioned, I think, all the requests for data. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Ali. Craig?
Yeah, this is Craig from Region 3. And yeah, I've been doing it for 28 years. Let's see. Yeah, using various things, just like Paul said, cameras, hoses, classification machines, and the request just a lot from planners for turn movements and development and signals, warrants, stuff like that. But yeah.
Great. I want to follow up on some of that in the next slide, but that's thanks for sharing that. JR, do you want to, let's line up JR first and then Josh Lucas, if you can go next.
Sure. Yeah, what I got up here, quality counts, been doing data collection now for a good while. Been working with ODOT, looking forward to helping figure out what's coming, what's next. That's it.
Thanks, JR. Josh?
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Yeah, this is Josh Lucas. I'm a traffic data analyst with the TSM unit. Work alongside Simon and Peralta. We're kind of in the trenches with the data, looking at it every day, importing from automatic traffic recorders around the state, and importing when we do have a count season, the short-term count data, the tubes, and some of the video data that is collected manually by counting. Yeah, so I think that's about it. We also help with some of the annual submittal and getting all the data kind of organized, and that's about it.
Thanks, Josh. Kevin, can you go next? And then Scott Beard, if you can go after Kevin, that'd be awesome.
This is Kevin from Region 5. Been field tech for many years. Videos, host counts, access management studies, signal studies, do a lot of studies for asphalt design, starting to anyway, flap studies, all sorts of studies for rural and Eastern Oregon stuff, and that's about it. Thanks.
This is Scott Baird with Kittleson. I will be our project principal for this this evaluation, and been obviously as a consultant, a long time end user of ODOT's data, and looking forward to helping shape the future and what things look like going forward. I'm in our Bend, Oregon office. So.
Thanks, Scott. All right. I think the last two names I have here is Simon and Will, and then we'll go on. Then we'll proceed to anybody who I didn't that I didn't mention. Simon.
Hey, how's it going? So my name is Simon. I'm a traffic data analyst with TSM, like Josh. Josh pretty much covered everything. I just want to add something on top of that. Me and Josh, since we are the front line managing the data, we actually utilize VBA, R, and Python to come up with automated processes in order to efficiently deliver data. So yeah, it's pretty much what we do.
Great, perfect. Will.
Yes, this is Will Adams. I'm the Region 2 Senior Traffic Recorder Tech, same as the other regions, is just using the hose counters, the videos, and other things to collect the data out on the road.
Great, thanks, Will. Is there anybody else on the call that I didn't call out?
Oh yeah, this is Ray Herrera. I've been with ODOT for well, almost 30 years. 2 more months will be 30 years. Anyway, been doing traffic counts with different machines, and we do videos, and that's about it.
Okay.
Hey, Yeman, this is Chris Wright. I just wanted to point out something that may be helpful for the Kittleson team to kind of understand. Reporting structure, if it wasn't clear, Craig, Kevin, and then Paul's old spot in Region 4, they report to the region traffic managers. They're still supporting the statewide program, but their reporting structure is a little different than Ray and Will that report to me, and then we also have a vacant Region 1 position. So each region has a technician that's helping out with the overall program, executing on the program with ATR, support and maintenance, and short-term counts. But the reporting structure and some of the other duties for regions 3, 4, and 5 go back to the region traffic managers. So just wanted to point that out. There's a little difference in reporting structure, but overall, all region techs support the statewide program.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks for highlighting that. I think that's something that we'll try to be cognizant about. If there are differences in needs between the different reporting structures, we'll definitely want. It's a good note for us to make sure we get that perspective from Ray and Will and Craig, Kevin, and Paul. That different input. Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think that was really our introduction. So thank you for that. That was really helpful. Let me try to summarize a little bit of what I heard from the data needs. It sounds like, at least from a producing perspective, the kind of requests you're getting ODOT TSM is mainly focused on, the star of the show here is the continuous traffic counting program. You've got a lot of short-term traffic counting initiatives as well. But for the long-term stuff, it's mostly about providing data for the HPMS program. So that's volumes, vehicle classifications or truck percentages, and any variation of that. So peak hour volumes, D and K factors, that kind of stuff. So that sounds like the majority of what you're doing for the continuous count program. And then you've got some short-term requests as well for turning movement counts and your hose or tube counters. Did I miss anything there in terms of, so that's your source data, and then a lot of the work is, you've got some of your analysts like Craig, Kevin, and Paul, or Ray and Will. They're doing all the number crunching and turning it into reports that you can share, right? So does that kind of summarize some of the key functions and the key needs within this group? That's the mandated stuff, right? Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So I think this will, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to the next slide because I feel like the conversation is going to start going to this questions, which is really focused on, what is the current program, and we've answered some of that in terms of the kinds of data we're collecting. I'd like to get some of the, it sounds like we've got a lot of folks who are out in the field and working with equipment. So can we start with that and just talk about, you talk about some hose counters and setting up video cameras. I'm assuming that's for turning movement counts. Can you walk us through a little bit about your experience working with being out in the field? Maybe we start with dealing with the tubes, and then we can talk about getting turning movement counts. And let's talk about what are some pain points? What are some difficulties with collecting data? What could be done better or differently? Anybody want to chime in on that? All right.
Don't be shy, guys. This is your time to complain about everything and let us know how we could be doing things better.
I'll start off. This is Paul. Just a quick overview of what we use. We have single tube road tube counters for collecting volume. Those machines communicate wirelessly with Bluetooth. So some issues with that often acquire Bluetooth connection to our laptops. we can't use default Bluetooth because Windows has issues, so we have to buy a separate type of Bluetooth dongle to make it work and connect. There are struggles around that whole thing. And then we have dual tube classification counters, which is a serial port connection, 9-pin. Right now, the current machine we have, it does the job well. It's just the serial causes a super slow connection, and sometimes it gets interrupted, and you have to restart it. With a direct connection like that, it shouldn't interrupt, but I think the computer has issues timing out. And then we have other machines, our permanent road tube traffic counter, or excuse me, permanent traffic counters that function off of loops cut into the highway. Not much to say about those. They monitor the loops that are embedded in the highway. They are DC powered, so when you install them in a cabinet, they just plug in a charger to keep them operating, and we have to replace the batteries every 1.5 to 2 years, unless something's gone wrong in the meantime. Those machines are capable of volume, class, speed, length, and then you can add an additional card inside the machine, like a card rack situation, and you can operate a piezo board. And I don't know how to explain piezo besides they detect axles and the width between the axles. Then we move on to radar. We have radar that collects volume, I believe, and I don't believe that the data that comes out of it is what TSM really likes to see, so we have to feed it the inputs into a Phoenix machine. The Phoenix machine then outputs the data, usable data, in a format that TSM can use. And then we step into video cameras for manual verification. In years gone by, people would sit in lawn chairs at intersections or highways and use a pencil pad or a clicker and record traffic and their movements. So safety and other things have come along in recent years. So now we use the cameras to record those movements and take the recordings back to the office, and then people view them on computers in a decent environment, or air conditioning environment, I should say.
A quick question
So
on the
those are
video cam. Quick question
Oh,
on
go
the
ahead.
video cameras. Like, have you exclusively gone to that? Is there still some mix of folks going out there with a JMA board and collecting data, and some folks doing stuff by video, or is it pretty much uniformly, if you're collecting turning movement counts, you're putting out a video?
Within ODOT, we don't use nothing but cameras, and then everything is broken down in the office. We don't send anybody out in the field to do manual verification anymore.
Great.
Do you mind if I ask what type of equipment you're using out in the field? You mentioned different types of tube counters and that kind of thing.
Currently, we're using Diamond TT6s, single volume count or single tube counters, and then the Time Mark for classification, and then Wavetronics for radar, Diamond Phoenix for permanent. Cameras, we have a couple different models, but camera's a camera.
Do you, for some of the permanent counting locations, do you, I know those work out of loops. Is maintenance an issue there? How often are you going out to fix some of these loops? Any experiences with the reliability of those systems, and is that a pain point? I'm just trying to dig into seeing how that's working for you.
Probably one of our biggest headaches is the types of asphalt, and Chris Harris could chime in on this probably, but it's all different road sections have, different types of geographically, we have locations around Oregon that the weather climate is just different. So they install different types of asphalt for the volume, for the conditions. Like in the gorge, you want, what do they call that? Perforated or asphalt that can accept water and drain it off and not puddle.
Pervious.
Pervious, yeah. Other road beds are concrete. Other road beds are real tight mixed type asphalt.
This is Kevin in Region 5. One of the main issues that we have over here is now the salt and the ice that's used that's eating away at a lot of our fixtures alongside the road and causing quite a bit of damage to roads. So I found this year lots of loops that have had issues due to damage from corrosion.
So one of our biggest factors is loop maintenance. It's kind of out of our hands. You know, we can't do much about it besides recut them when the asphalt expands and contracts, or we get salt on them. We're more of in the cabinet fix, but we have usually concentrated issues around loops and getting those repaired, which requires other professions to repair that. Occasionally we have software issues or firmware issues in the machines, and we have to respond to those and troubleshoot them or exchange the machines out of the cabinet and send the broken ones, the failed ones, back to the vendor to have them diagnose it and fix it. Other than that, we have routine maintenance where we monitor the loops, degradation of continuity. We exchange the batteries out to keep them going. Basically just keep the cabinet clean and monitor what's going on inside there.
Okay. This routine maintenance, is that done internally within ODOT, or do you have contractors who are doing other work and kind of required to do that routine maintenance for you? How's that handled?
No, we do it all in-house, all ODOT. We are first line to respond, and then we diagnose it, and then our techs determine if it's needing to have other profession like loop cutters come in and reinstall the loops, or if they need a electrician to dig deeper into issues with the power. So.
Okay.
I could jump in just with a couple things, and techs, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Some of the other maintenance issues, so the piezo sensors, they're on the continuous counter sites that give us classification data, which is really important for us. And right now, I think we only have about 9 of them functioning, and I think they're a really big pain point for maintenance. They're only lasting about 5 years, and then we have to go out and replace them. And so they're a really important source of data, and the technology, doesn't stay around very long for us to get good usable data. The other piece with the radar heads, I'm not sure how often, but they need to be calibrated from time to time, and can give us misleading data there too. And Paul and the other folks, I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed anyway since I've been here is pain point wise is communication. So, whether, like you said earlier, with the serial connections, whether it's Bluetooth and firmware interoperability, it's phone lines, digital modems, hard connections versus wireless connections and things like that, interruptions in service and dealing with the telecom companies, that seemed to be a really one of the things that we deal with probably more often than anything else.
That was a good point, Chris, because some areas of Oregon you cannot get landline, some areas you cannot get cell phone reception, so we do struggle with communications.
Yeah, this is Ray. On the piezo's, installation is a big, really, really important factor. the way that whoever we contract with to do the piezo's, they have to know what they're doing. Because we've run into some problems where they haven't done them right, and there's some that are right now not even functioning, they're brand new.
From using the wrong kind of
From
sealant, too hot in the sealant, and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, so installation is a really big factor on that one.
Mm-hmm.
For the piezo's.
Well, that's some really great information. I want to so the one item that was brought up, and I want to kind of get into that a little bit, was communication. That I have a couple of questions. So I think you mentioned about some issues with the different. It sounds like there are two things here. There's one where you have a lot of equipment with different kinds of ports and connections. Some are using a RS-232 connection. Some are using some other kind of serial ports and USB and all that. And that just having all the ability to work with different kinds of devices, that's one thing, like locally between your computer and the sensor. But is there a more network issue? Like, for example, do you have equipment that rely on GSM or cellular, and do you maintain cellular plans? Because I know sometimes that can be a pain to manage cellular plans. Is that something TSM manages?
Yes, we do have a small batch of sites that are on wireless, and I can't name off the numbers of how many we have, but it's a small list. So we're finding out as our machines age, the firmware boards are not being kept up, or I should say supported anymore. So they have to install new boards or firmware as they come back from the shops, the vendors. As we progress in new technology, dial-up modems not being supported on newer machines. So we have tried to stick with old firmware and not upgrade, because majority of our sites are landline, and that's just because what's available and that's what's reliable. Cellular, as everybody knows, is kind of spotty in certain areas of Oregon and drops in and out, and that just causes big issues. We don't have that on a fiber network. It would be great if we would or could, but it's just fiber is not available at where our locations are. There's just a short list of where fiber is available.
So, Paul, I want to jump in on that. This is Chris Wright. I want to make sure you kind of understand that we are in this spot where our legacy equipment is really no longer supported, or we have to go through a specific kind of upgrade sequence with some of our vendors. So as Paul kind of just alluded to, we're actually telling some of our vendors to not upgrade to the most current firmware, and sometimes that's causing problems. So we are in this point where we have a lot of legacy equipment that's really not being supported very well, and yet we can't move forward because it'll break down our process. I mean, that is one of the underlying issues we have. And then to kind of follow up on the telecom communication issues, that again is another huge challenge. So we are implementing the MS2 platform right now, and when we were putting the RFP together, we were interested in their auto polling function, where the software will automatically poll the counters for you to download that data, and we can't do it because most of our counters are on landlines, and so they're not TCP IP compliant. The only ones that would be those that are on a digi router. So Paul just alluded to that, right? We don't have fiber everywhere, but obviously we do have fiber on certain areas, and so we had looked into that in the past, and we'll get into this, I think, with future discussions, but I would like to see if we can broach better sharing of kind of the fiber backbone or other telecom infrastructure that maybe ITS, Signals, or Motor Carrier has. I think the longer we stay on landlines, the more risk we have of. I've heard from some folks that if there were to be a major disaster, landlines would be the last thing to come up. because there's so few that are using it. It's such a kind of a dying breed and has a lot of intensive field time for field techs to get through. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in and kind of reiterate what Paul just said.
Thank you. That's really helpful. We're having some really good discussion on the hardware side of things, and if there are any more inputs on that, I'd like to hear that. But if you don't mind, I want to also cover on the other end of the spectrum. Once you've collected the data, what do you have? I guess what are the response times like? And is there any constraints in terms of getting reports out? Are you getting a lot of different requests for different kinds of reports? Help me understand what are some of the bottlenecks, if any, that you're facing with the collection and then the processing, reporting, and distribution of data. Like, is there, where would you say is your some of your bottlenecks in your process, if any?
I think, Don, you'd probably be best positioned to help frame this up.
Sure. Although this one's a little tough because we're about to totally change the software side, which we hope is about to improve a lot of this. Although I'm sure there will still be some things that are not helped by it. But software-wise, we've had a program that is only available to internal folks. It's a little clunky in some ways, and so loading things can be tough, running the reports can be tough, and it has required a lot of TSM's time to help people access the data. The new software, MS2, is cloud-based, and so people inside will have greater access than those outside. But now anybody will be able to get to at least some of the data and just get it themselves, not have to take our time, which every bit of time that we spend helping customers, which we know that's part of the job. I'm not complaining about that, but it is a time user that we could add more value to if we were allowed to not spend as much time on some of the customer stuff. But there will always be some of the higher load customer projects that will still take a lot. We do have a limited number of people both in the field and in the office, and so when we have requests from region planners or modelers or signal designers, whoever it may be, they've got to wait for either our technicians to do it or for us to hand it off to contractors to do. And so there's inevitable amount of time to at least work through that piece of the process and then get the data loaded and reported and analyzed before reporting to make sure everything looks good. QA, QC kind of work.
Mm-hmm. So if I were to let's say I'm the customer and I put in a request for something funky, something that's not in your standard report, and I'm asking, hey, I'm doing a study along this US 26 or something, and I need to get data for a specific time period. What are the parameters that are time drivers for you, and where, like, can you give me a sense of what that turnaround time would take, and what's the biggest variable there? Is it when you hand it off to someone to process the data? Is that the biggest variable, or is it collecting the data itself? Like, is that all sites connected by a landline and you can access remotely, or do you have to go to site and collect it?
Well, there's a wide variety in that, for sure, depending on whether you're looking for something that we can get from the permanent counters, or something that we actually have to go out and collect before we can get it to you. Anything that involves the collection, actually got to send somebody out to road tubes, do videos. That's going to take a good bit of time, depending on how many stipulations customer puts on there. Some of them, they just want some good data as soon as you can get it. Others are looking for some specialty things, like go collect it on the high volume weekends, so we get a feel for what the peaks are like, or make sure it's when school is in session. And if they hand us that kind of request at the end of June, it's going to be a while. And we do have some of the folks that do that kind of thing, that think ahead and warn us well ahead of time. Others, it's last minute, and they're going to be dissatisfied with when they get it, because we weren't prepared to go out and get it. If it's video oriented data, that adds even more time, because we've got to have somebody in the office sit down and watch the full length of that video. If there's a lot of different movements and it's high volume, they may have to watch it more than once even. It just all depends on how big of a video it is. And then any type of data, it's got to be entered into the system, some sort of loader, and then reviewed to make sure it's decent data, looking for both human error in collecting it, or this was an unusual day, they came in with some equipment in the middle of it and threw things off, and then hey, do we have to do it again, or can you accept a little bit of off data? And then the reporting, and that one can vary depending on just how close it is to some of our standard reporting that you want, versus something that's going to require some manipulation. And usually, if it's something that takes a lot of manipulation, we'll aim at getting the customer the basics and let them do some of that manipulation themselves.
Great.
So there's several places in that process that can take a short time or a long time, depending on what is being requested. A lot of variability. And the region folks can chime in on some of this, both from the data collection piece, as well as, like Craig and Paul and Kevin, as far as what the customers are looking for.
just curious, how of the requests that you receive, and I know this might be a tough question to answer, but if you were to give just a ballpark number of a split, how much of those requests are standard reports, reports that you already have a script and a process to deliver, versus how much of those are one-off reports with short-term count for this specific time period and for data in a funky format? I guess how much time is being spent on ad hoc type reporting versus standard reporting? Do you have a sense on the 50-50 split or where that might lie?
I mean, we have a lot of customers with a lot of history with us, and so most stuff is going to be in some pretty standard formats. They know what we produce, and so that's what they ask for. Even those who would like something more than that, we have limited time, and so with them we usually say, here's a couple of possible formats, which one is closest to what you want. We just don't have time to do too much customization unless it's coming down from the director's office or something, and that certainly happens.
Hey guys, this is Chris. I think it might be helpful too, for the Kittleson team to understand like what our whole count program looks like. So coverage counts versus special project counts and tubes and videos. Just maybe ballpark numbers on what a typical year might look like.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Sure. Yeah,
Don or Ollie, if you guys have those. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, on the coverage count side, we do several thousand per year as just our normal go lay out the hose tubes. Some are by video just because of the high volume, high speed locations. The specials, we have several hundred per year. I think our highest year was 600 or 700 special counts, but it's always 200, 300, 400 typically. A lot of those are manual counts where we get a video, but even some of the tube counts are wrapped up in special projects.
So just terminology right there. When you say coverage counts, what is that?
Those are the regularly scheduled. They're either on a 3-year program or a 6-year program to maintain a record of what those roads values are like. We're collecting AADTs, classification data, the basic stats that allow a management of the entire system. Planners use it. Designers will go there, usually first, and then if they need more detailed information, come and ask for that. But it's that data that allows us to do the annual type reporting, the stuff we give to FHWA, the stuff we give to the traffic volume tables, the stuff that we put on our TransGIS site for all internal and external customers. It's just a regularly carried out program.
Okay. And then the special counts that you mentioned, those are ad hoc requests. Maybe they have a big project, something they need more counts. Okay.
Right.
Great. Thank you for that. Coverage counts. I wrote down several thousand per year. Do you have like, is that 3,000? Is that more in the order of 5,000? Do you have a ballpark there?
Yeah, I'd say more on the 2,000 to 3,000.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Well, yeah, great. I think just to keep on time, I'm gonna go to the next slide. Again, this whole questions, they're kind of fluid. Some of these things, as we talk about it, we will inevitably talk about what we want to do next. So, or go backwards. So feel free to kind of move back and forth as needed. But I'd like to just put a focus a little bit on the future. And I think we talked about some communications challenges, so that could be something we look into. But I just wanted to build upon some of the pain points that folks had brought up. Let me start with just this open-ended question. Where do you see opportunities for improvement? Whether it's from the process of collecting data or the process of after you've collected the data and what you're doing in there, or streamlining requests or things like that. Like, do you see maybe start with your pain points and what do you see as opportunity for improvement?
This is Chris. I think one of the things that maybe we haven't touched on enough that is a good opportunity for improvement is around safety. So a lot of the technology and hardware we use right now requires folks to actually go out in the road to either set the equipment or maintain the equipment. And so I think there's a good opportunity for us to maybe focus on technologies that are sensing type technologies, like radar, things like that, where we can keep our staff out of the road, in a little bit better safe position while still getting the data that we need.
Are there you mentioned radar, are there technologies that you already have in mind for that, or just kind of, is it kind of still an early idea?
Sure. I think radar is one that we use right now, so it makes sense. I don't know, other folks, the region techs and other folks, have you seen anything else that shows some promise?
I mean, this is Will Adams. I've tested some of the side shooting radar, like the kind of semi-permanent stuff, but against the ATRs, and some of that, there's a lot of occlusion in it. So I mean, we've tried that. Maybe single direction would work, that kind of stuff. But I don't know if there's new stuff, because it's been a few years ago. But.
But that's a good point. How do we get our techs out of the field of out of the right of way of vehicles, right? And that's a risk item. What are some of the riskiest type of activities or equipment? Is it setting up the hoses? Is that the riskiest type of activity?
Yeah, that's fairly risky.
Yeah, I would say from a manager's perspective, it's definitely got to be short-term counts, and then also, and we talked about this earlier on, but anytime we're trying to do maintenance on loop sealant type activities, that is a significant concerning challenge for us, because especially if we're doing it on an interstate, we've got to be cognizant of traffic disruptions, but also the safety is paramount out there. So that has been a challenge for us, of finding the right resources, and this debate of playing Frogger at 2 a.m. on I-84 is just makes my skin crawl. So that kind of goes back to a bit of a workforce and resources. The same thing with I can't remember if it was Ray who went out, but we have I believe we have a Sidefire Wavetronics radar off of kind of over St. Paul area, and we don't have bucket trucks in our workforce, and it's right off the right of way. So really, any type of maintenance of the equipment is challenging. But overall, I'd say yes, short-term counts. We do have spotters for staff for our techs, but still, that just bending down at the roadside, putting down the tubes, coming back and collecting it right, so you're visiting it twice. That is definitely I think the highest risk concern.
What about in terms of workforce planning? Is there a particular is there a consensus on like, yeah, we need more analysts, or yeah, we need more field technicians, or we can't retain certain kinds of job descriptions just because high turnover rate? Is there like from a workforce perspective, are there any needs from this group? Anything that stand out?
Well, this is Chris. I'll give my 2 cents here and kind of give some context for folks and kind of relate it back to the ITS TSMO concept where, so TSMO, Transportation Systems Management Operations, is kind of one of the terms that ITS and traffic are starting to use. But that has been a big conversation piece for that group of, hey, as data increases, as analytics tools increase, as different data providers come to the marketplace, how does the DOT ensure they have the right resources to procure, analyze, validate, maintain all these, whether it's an in-house data source or an external? My sense is the traffic counting program hasn't really had that much of a discussion about workforce. I think our field technician positions have looked pretty similar for a long time. And I think we're kind of butting up to that issue of, if we want to do more interaction with ITS field techs, there's a bit of a challenge because our equipment's so different. There's such a gap there. And I think moving forward, I am kind of interested to continue to look at this of what do we need to do to make sure we have the right folks with the right skill set, helping make sure our traffic counting program is the best it can be. So that's kind of, I think, some of the context there that my time with Galen and ITS, that was a really big national conversation, workforce. I haven't heard much of it for our field tech folks, and so I want to kind of bring that up and definitely want to hear what you all have to think about that.
Yeah.
This is Chris. So some of the stuff that I hear about, and Paul, maybe you can expand a little bit, but I think about the folks that we have to reach out to maintain or operate our equipment. Electricians, we have to reach out to a lot, and then around the signals folks, we have to coordinate with them just to get into a cabinet to be able to work on it sometimes. So that seems to be a bit of a roadblock. I don't know if there are maybe opportunities moving forward there, but those are the two that I hear about the most anyway.
Yes. Along with that, working on the highway, you need permission from the district, or you need traffic control if you're doing anything on the roadway for a longer period of time. I can see in higher congested areas, it would be nice to have more personnel, your traffic count tech and a spotter. So like Portland, it's a big area. That'd be great if we had 2 teams up there, just for safety.
Do you always have a spotter when you're out in the field? Or is that not is that kind of, if we have staff, we have a spotter? What's the policy or the way we operate right now?
If we're in the roadway.
Well, over the years that I've been doing this survey, I worked in Region 1 and Region 2 both. And Portland, when I first started in Portland, we had 4 traffic counters. And then it went down to 3, and then 2, and then 1. And then, but right now, I mean, it's always been kind of a risk in that area of Portland, but now it's getting to be more of a risk because you have a lot of different issues coming up, you know, like safety issues, because we have a lot of homeless things going on up there, a lot of different kind of paraphernalia all over, and it's just not safe to be up there by yourself at any time of the day, and so you have to be really careful. And at nighttime, you should always have a spotter with you. It doesn't matter. I don't care where you're at. And even in the daytime, I mean, we have a different thing than in the rural areas, but up here in Portland and Salem and Region 1, Region 2, we have a lot of different issues, you know. And to me, we should always have spotters in these 2 regions. And in Portland, you just it's just a whole different scenario. It's not safe.
It's more metro, so versus us in Salem's a little bit more rural, and versus then you go to East, it's even more rural.
And now you have people making up their own rules on the highway. They do. It doesn't matter whether it's in the city or on a freeway or wherever. They make their own rules up. They drive how they want to drive, and you could just be sitting on the side of the road in your van, and somebody might nail you because they make their own laws here. They don't go by the rules. I see it every day, and it's just it's a danger. I mean, you know, in the rural areas, I don't know. I haven't worked out there, but I imagine it's a little bit different. I'm sure it's still dangerous because you get people. Well, I saw a guy going east, and there was nobody on the freeway. I drove over by the Dalles, and he was going way over 100. Oh, I bet you he was going as fast as that car would go, about 170, 160, 100. I mean, however fast they go, he was flying. And thank God there was nobody around. I don't know where he was going, but he was flying. So, you know, even out there, I'm sure they go fast, and they could never stop in time for anything. So it's just a big risk when you're out there on the road. I mean, you know. Mm-hmm. I can't emphasize that enough.
Mm-hmm. This is Kevin over Region 5. We have a lot of distracted driving issues. Mm-hmm. Distracted drivers and sight distance with our roadside vegetation and trees and everything like that in some of our areas that drivers don't seem to pay attention, and speed is a big issue since we raised our speed limits in our secondary highways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That just helps us understand some of the challenges and the safety issues when you're out in the field. I really like that point. I mean, this is all really good stuff to strengthen the case for you know, that could be something we look into more. You know, either by technology or you know, if there's any. Do you ever feel like there's not enough staff to always have a spotter? Is that ever a constraint for any of your jobs, or should the solution, you know, mostly try to be as remote as possible from the roadway?
I think both.
I would say Portland's probably the toughest challenge. Getting a spotter up there. I don't believe that we have FTEs to cover all that, so we go out on temporary agencies to cover that. Mm-hmm. But in my experience, I've worked in Portland and I've worked in the rural areas, but Portland is the most challenging area. Getting assistance and support from other groups to get repairs done it's probably the most challenging out of the whole state. just to get anything. Talking to electricians, talking to right of way, traffic control. It's just more difficult because your population is so huge and your crews are just strapped on other work, and it just takes longer to schedule things.
Yes, this is Chris Wright. Just to follow up with what Paul said is that we don't have any state spotter staff per se. We have some of our traffic survey interviewers, the folks that break out the video verifications. Some of them we have kind of deployed to help out with staff, and others are on kind of on call, but oftentimes both in Region 1 and sometimes Region 2, as Paul alluded to, we're having to contract with temporary companies. And so one of the challenges there is that's a pretty intimate relationship that you're having to build with someone. Is that person reliable? When we ask techs to go and flip their schedules so they're collecting at night in some of the high volume areas, is that person showing up? And I think we've had some issues from time to time. Ray and others have some less than desirable stories about interactions with techs, with spotters, contracted spotters. So that is definitely a challenge for us from time to time, is having a reliable person there that as a tech you feel like they've got your back when you're going to be out at 2 a.m. putting down a road tube.
Mm-hmm.
You get a person trained up and kind of, and like Chris was saying, kind of it can anticipate them a little bit, start working with them, and then, they moved on to a different job because the pay is better, it's more solid. It's just a temporary situation. So.
And another thing on the spotting, you can. I've been out there enough years that I've seen rural or city, whatever, and you can have a spotter, and spotter is a really good thing, and the quality of the spotter, if they've been a flagger, to me it seems like they're a lot better than just a regular person. But you look at the road, they look at the road, and I'll tell you, people can come out of nowhere, because you can look every direction and nobody's on that road, and all of a sudden they come up with a side street or somewhere else on the road, but they show up out of nowhere. So the spotter is a good thing, but both the spotter and the person, field tech, have to keep watching the road, and even then people will appear out of nowhere, and you have to really be on the ball, because it happened to me probably more than once, but you really have to watch what you're doing, and the spotter has, and a good spotter, I cannot tell you how valuable a good spotter is. You could count on it for a lot. And I can't even emphasize that enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm that's what I'm hearing from this conversation. It sounds like one of the big items we can try to address is the idea of workforce safety, and some of it might be technology, some of it might be staffing. I'm not sure what the right solution is yet, but it sounds like some of the problems I'm hearing is in the Portland region, it's hard to get a good spotter, just a spotter, but also hard to get a good spotter, and on top of that, there's some of the technologies that we've looked at, like radar, there are some practical challenges with that, with collusion and things like that. So on the technology side, it's not a clear path right now, but we can look into that and see what ideas we have, right? Okay, so let me try to quickly summarize a few categories of what I've heard from a future program. I'm not sure. I think it sounds like from this conversation at the top, it sounds like workforce safety is one category. There's legacy hardware. That's another challenge that the agency is experiencing, and how to navigate that. There's issues with communication, whether it's cellular or more local kind of communication issues, but that's not one thing. There's the sort of capability or skill sets for integration or interoperability with ITS and TSM, and there's coordination, interagency coordination, whether it's coordinating with signals and ITS for access to the cabinets, or coordination with electricians and highway traffic control kind of stuff. So safety, communication issues, legacy hardware, interoperability / skill set, and interagency coordination. I think those are some of the key items I'm hearing. From a asset management perspective, because I know Chris Harris, you had mentioned that briefly, and that could be a whole discussion on its own. But what is that like for your group? Is getting a idea of inventory and stuff? Is that typically an issue? Because I know you're managing a lot of hardware, or do you want to touch on asset management, Chris, and see what you're thinking there?
Sure. I'll say something real quick, and I'll probably give it to Paul because he just had to go through this whole exercise. But really, it's with having equipment all over, we have a hard time keeping track of what we have, but also maintenance schedules, and if equipment gets swapped out and batteries. We just have a lot of spreadsheets all over the place, and local knowledge in different places. So it is Paul's job is to be a field coordinator, and this is a piece of that, and it's a full-time job on itself, I think, and he has a lot of other things to do as well. So it's a lot to keep up with, and we don't have really a centralized system. Paul, do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, when I stepped in, I just discovered that it's all manual, multiple spreadsheets going on, and it's manual input on each one. So if you change one, you have to jump into one or two more spreadsheets to update those. So nothing is like married together, nothing's automated. It just makes it very complicated. And then you get on a verbal communication what was swapped in or out of a site, and you have to rely upon people to make sure that they note that down. And oftentimes people are gone home or sick, or things happen. Just life happens, and things don't get recorded, and then you find out later what was in there. So there's a lot of chasing of serial numbers, parts, where they're located. ODOT's main inventory asset personnel down in Salem, their standard format is they want to physically know if it's in your van, or if it's in your storage, or if it's on an APR site. That's some of their requirements. So you have to probe around quite a bit to find out.
So this is Chris. I just want to add two things, kind of maybe a higher level, or just quick summaries. One, I am very fortunate to have been able to hire Paul, and that we still have Ray and Kevin and Craig and Will and everyone that have institutional knowledge. If we had serious loss of institutional turnover, the plate spinning that Paul and others are doing now to keep all of this together and kind of have one version of the truth would come crashing down. And so we've got to kind of future-proof ourselves for institutional knowledge loss. It's going to happen at some point. Ray, bless his soul, loves to continue to do this, but sometime he's going to figure out that retirement sounds pretty good, and he's going to want to hang up his hat. The other thing is, if we had an opportunity for funding to do some upgrades, I couldn't articulate very well to upper management what our need is based on our existing condition of our equipment. That kind of goes back to what Chris Harris said. And Paul have got multiple spreadsheets tracking versions and motherboards and cabinets and all that kind of stuff. There isn't a way to roll that up to say, here is the overall program asset value and condition. That's a big conversation right now in ODOT, right? Signals conditions. What's the condition of the mast and the poles and the cabinets? We have nothing like that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the
lot of work.
Yeah, that's the reoccurring theme we're hearing with asset tracking and signals. A lot of desires as they track asset, they're able to better articulate the degrading state of their assets, and it just helps with funding, justification for funding, right? Okay.
This is Ray.
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to mention we're helping out with Region 1 right now, and I'll tell you, I'm trying to get as many ATRs, maintenance, and pictures and all that, because I'll tell you, it's been a little bit of a challenge because some pictures haven't been taken for a while or whatever, and but all that really helps, the pictures and the different maintenance sheets and all that, because then you have an idea. The next person that steps into the shoes of whoever's going to be up there, it will give them a lot better footing if they have all that stuff, because it's just important to have. For Paul's inventory and our inventory, or just to see what's been going on, it's really helpful. So I can't, that would be really nice if that could be perfected a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to add to that, the photos, the locations of everything, it's what asset management in Salem asks for, because if there's a fire, they want to have the ability to account of what was lost or stolen, or if we had a burglary. So if we have pictures and we have noted locations of equipment and where they're at, that's the whole premise behind recording everything in detail.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's really fantastic input, everybody. Thank you for that. What I'm gonna do is we're at our time, so I'm just gonna do a quick. I'm not gonna get to this group activity. That's why I kept the title vague, because I was skeptical whether we would actually have a group activity. But this is something I just want to share with you. I didn't want to start the conversation by today's conversation by introducing a different framework, and I want you to talk in the language you're familiar with, But one of the frameworks that we find really useful is this thing called a value proposition canvas. So if you think of TSM as a business, right, and you've got customers and you've got partners, right? The idea is that this canvas just is a different way of framing the questions we already asked. It's about defining on the right hand side is what your customer sees, feels, and thinks. So what are your customers' jobs? Maybe it's a roadway designer, right? That roadway designer needs certain kinds of data to do pavement design. So those are the requirements of his job. But then there's the other aspects of things where, like, what are some pain points? Maybe I don't know, it could be turnaround time. It could be the format is in a way that's difficult for me to work with, or something like that. And gains could be something as simple as, getting this data makes me look good in front of my boss. It could be something as primeval and simple as that. But the idea of this framework is that it's just helps if we can define some customers, what their jobs are, pains and gains. Then we can think on the left-hand side as TSM, what are some key activities to address those pains and gains and customer jobs. So I don't want to get too much into this, but this is something that at least internally we'll kind of use this to frame up some of what we just discussed and see if there are any gaps. Sometimes it's helpful to apply our facts to a different framework to see if there are items that we may have overlooked. But I think we've got a really good discussion here internally. I'm going to skip past this. I think it's just my preliminary attempt at defining some customers and partners, and just based on our discussion, I think this list will grow a little bit. But let me jump into next steps and say where do we go from here. I think this is really great discussion, and I think we could keep going at this if we had more time. So what I'm going to do after this call is I'm going to share a link to our website. Our website has several resources. The project website, which I'm just going to pull down over here, this is our project website. It's just a simple portal for us to download deliverables and things like that. Right now, we don't have a memo or anything. So if you go to project documents on the top column here, you'll see check back in later. Is what it'll say. It's not no documents to share yet. But this is where we'll be listing meetings and just general resources. But one area is that if you've got something you wanted to share that you weren't able to share during this session, there's this stakeholder resources page where if you click on needs assessment survey, it'll basically it's a very basic survey that just covers everything we asked today. You just put in your name, agency, and your email, and they'll ask you the same questions we went through today. So if there's something that you wanted to share, and even if you don't have a question that quite fits what you wanted to share, just feel free to enter anyway. These are all open-ended optional questions. Other than your name and organization and email, everything else is optional. So just anything you can throw at us, we'll be happy to take it in. But this is just a resource which I'll send over afterwards, and I'll send it also to folks who weren't able to attend. They can participate this way. But yeah, look out for some. We'll summarize what we've heard and share it in some meeting notes. In the meantime, what I'll ask is everyone on the call, if there are specific reports or data requests that you think it might be useful for us to have, just so we understand what your day-to-day responses are like, please feel free to share them with me. My email is in my invite. That's yha@kittleson.com. A lot of this information we'll be going through the next over the course of the next 2 weeks. We're doing sessions like this with different groups: planning, design, signals, and ITS. And we're going to continue this data gathering and try to summarize all of this in an evaluation in two things. One is a needs assessment memo, which is what we've heard. And then when it comes to the technology piece, we'll try to put together some framework of how can we evaluate key technologies. This is going to be a more general evaluation matrix that applies to different kinds of technologies. But stay tuned for that. That's coming in the following weeks. And I'll coordinate with Chris Harris over the next coming weeks to schedule the next set of work sessions. So for this group, I think we'll probably, the next time we'll meet will probably be in around mid-July. So week of July 12th is what we're thinking, right? So I know I went through that real quick. I'm happy to stay on a little longer if you have any questions, but just out of respect for everyone's time, I know I'm 5 minutes over. So if you need to go, feel free to leave. Thank you for your time, and I'll stick around if anybody has anything else they wanted to share or add. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you, guys. Eamon, I think I had the team do a little bit of preliminary work to get ready for today's meeting, so I'll share the notes that we have from that, as well as I think maybe Don has some good examples that we provided to MS2 for reports and things like that. So we probably have those fairly accessible, and we can provide some examples of the products that we deliver, and also what our annual submittal data looks like, so you can have a good feel for that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. Just curious, for these annual submittals, do you actually do you have to go to all the ATRs and collect data from this? I mean, I know some of them sounds like they have on landline, but how much of those ATR sites require you to be manually at site to collect the data?
We can get to all of them remotely most of the time when the communications are working. So Josh and Simon, they do sometimes a couple of times a week, but at least about once a week they go in and, well, there's auto polling that happens for most of the sites, and so every day their machines are set on a routine to go and extract data, and then if anything's wrong, they'll have to go back and manually call it and review things. So we're pulling data from those sites very regularly, and then they go into our system of record and get reviewed. I guess it's pulled more daily and reviewed weekly, and then scrutinized very closely at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, is any other questions from anybody? All right.
This is Kevin in Region 5.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, just a helper that I know for the technology side of things, if we can start looking at something that will speed up the time that we're alongside the road, i.e. setting up hose tubes, setting up the counters, this and that. I mean, we can set them up before we go out in the field. Just, I'm thinking time sensitive deals of, get things get clear with Bluetooth or get something moving forward in a better programming means of one program running all of our counters, or we're just tied up with a whole bunch. I mean, which you already know, which everybody knows, we're tied up with a whole bunch of different programs that run different entities of our program. Mm-hmm. So this technology base moving forward, if we can get honed into a one tool instead of multiple tools, it sure would speed the process up, and I think make it safer out on the road where we're not distracted trying to figure out the programming or just taking more time alongside the road. Just my input.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful. I think the one thing that if we can get a better understanding of like what those processes look like, out in the field, that will give us a better idea of what are the key functions that we're looking for in some of these. Maybe it's a different kind of tube, a different kind of hose, a vendor that has something that streamlines a particular part of the process. You're spending less time setting up, so I think that I'll coordinate with Chris Harris and see how we can set something up. But I'm thinking that if we can do a session, small group of just understanding, okay, what does it look like to set up a hose? Even if we're not out there in the field, we're socially distancing. But I think that can just make things a bit more real for us, so we know what kind of features that we're looking for, or what kinds of technologies might be better considered. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very good thought.
That's a good point. I also then want to get our the folks that handle the manual count videos involved and get their voice heard a little bit as well, so they can. I didn't want to keep them in this big discussion, but as we get a little more focused on, like you said, those specific processes of what our field techs do, and then really what's important for the folks that are breaking down those videos, I think that'll be a really good, helpful session for us.
Great. Okay. Anybody else? Anything to you wanted to share? All right. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. I think this was a really great session. I'll be posting this video out on the website. I'll attach it with the email as well, so you'll know where to access it on the project website. But thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your morning. Chris Harris and the rest of the core team, I'll see you tomorrow for our next session. Bye, everybody.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.